Hey everyone, this video is entitled Your Identity is in Your Job. And I was just thinking about how so many men and women consider that their job is who they are. And, I have seen it like in, you know, many websites, differing opinions regarding this. Some say that their identity is in what they do. Some say that they don't have to be so closely related to their job. And it seemed like there were also other opinions as well regarding this. And, I find that somebody can be so wrapped up in what they do. And it's as if, their job and who they are so intertwined that their worth comes from that exactly. So basically, I really want to come against anything that would set up man's worth and his worth being in what he does. Because what if he can no longer do what he does? Then is he no longer worth anything? And I think this is really what the world really tries to place on the shoulders of man. And this is something I want to come against, you know, and instill in my hearers that you are more than what you do. You know, if you're a believer, your worth is so great. And if you don't know that, then by the end of this video, I pray that your your opinion of yourself will change, that you can look higher. So, who are you? How would you respond to that question? Now, some would give qualities that they possess. I learned this very thing from business college. Uh, what was it? We were given different things about getting the job that we want. And so when we were asked by a potential employer during an interview, they would ask us who we are. We don't say our names. We were supposed to say, what good qualities that we possess. I would say something like I am a hard worker. Uh, I, I'm creative and different other qualities like that. That is the answers that we had to give. So, that it would, I guess, give a possible employer, you know, something that's positive about us that would make them want to hire us. So others would say, their identity is in their names. When you're pulled over by a police officer, heaven forbid, for speeding or, breaking the laws, they would ask for your identity and your registration. Some would say that their identity is in their jobs. Um, or, some could say that they're identified through a family member. I remember the movie Spanglish. It's a good movie. And at the end of it, the daughter said, "My identity rests firmly in who I am. I am my mother's daughter." And so you have different responses from different people. You may have heard it yourself, and you heard people talk, or you researched on the internet about different things and you've come across these. So basically, your identity is not your job or your occupation. I remember there was a man at church, and my friends and I were already at that place where, we knew who we were, in God. And we knew that our jobs weren't who we were. But this man boldly said that his job is who he was. And, that is just, it's falsely misrepresented. It's giving people the wrong idea. And if anything, when you don't live up to that certain expectation, then it's just failure that's waiting to happen. And when failure happens, then criticism from those around you. And so that is one thing. When I hear a response like that, I don't agree, and I have to come against something like that, because I know anybody with that thinking, is in trouble, especially when negative happens. When someone works hard all the time, they get wrapped up in it. They're in this world, you're focused on making money, being comfortable, having enough food and clothing, and just having enough in general, in which this is your identity, which you can do for your family. And then worth is what you can bring to the table, through your career or your job. Now, this next section is tied to that exact thing. Your worth is what you bring to the table. If self-worth is tied to your job, what happens if you lose your job? You're then no longer worth anything. You're a failure in the eyes of your family, your friends, those that you know, people at church who have that same mentality. Now, in this world, your worth is based on what you can bring to the table. And I already emphasized that, good career, a lot of money, having a house. And, I had seen this response from a lot of women that to them, a man's worth is what good he has in this world, being stable, having a house, having a lot of money, having a good career. And that's the impression I got when I saw a lot of these profiles, is that somebody like me who doesn't have anything is not worth anything. And it got to the point to where I just did not even want to look at a lot of these profiles anymore. What's the purpose of it? Why would you want to even be with somebody, or rather speak to them, if you're never going to be worth anything in their eyes? Because if they can't see the good qualities in you, even if you don't have them, then, somebody like that, why would you want to have them around? So finding somebody that's a friend that can look beyond what you may lack in this world and see the good in you, that is somebody that is good to have in your life. It's like we hear in this world that it's not good to be around toxic people. But somebody like that doesn't see your worth and who you are and the good qualities that you have, why even bother having somebody that is toxic like that? They are toxic people, whether they realize it or not. So if a man loses his job, he loses his identity. So, like I had already said, is that the man's job and who he is so intertwined. He has put everything into his job, his time, his thoughts, and he's invested so much in his job. But once he loses his job, he loses his means of worth that he can bring to the table. And so if he loses his worth, then in the eyes of people, maybe he's not worth anything. Maybe in his mind, he isn't worth anything. So I think about that movie Sling Blade, if you've seen it. I had said in many other videos, but it's a good example. that in the movie, the little boy Frankie was talking about his dad and how his dad killed himself because he thought that, he wasn't worth anything, that uh, he didn't make as much money as he wanted. The little boy said that he was working odd jobs to try to take care of them. And Frankie said, I thought he took care of us just fine. But apparently, his worth and what he could bring to the table meant so much to him that in his mind, he didn't think that he was helping his family. He didn't think that he was a good provider. And so he wasn't worth anything in his mind. He felt like he was a failure, and that's why he took his life. And how many men have done that in this world? How many men have learned from this society that who you are is in what you do? And then we have The Wedding Singer, which is another good example where, Robbie fell in love with Julia, and it seemed that he didn't like being a wedding singer. And it was as if his worth was on the line with this, and he felt bad about living in his sister's basement. He felt bad because his girlfriend was posing fun at what he was doing. She was like, I realized I'm about to marry a wedding singer. I'm never going to leave Ridgefield. And, she's like, I'm going to be home with a baby while you're at these wedding gigs making $60 a pop. And, just, she didn't see his worth, but Julia saw his worth. And he had all these different examples, even from her cousin, were saying that security is important to all people. And he's like, well, I guess I'm screwed. And so he thought even Julia felt the same. So he had to go in his mind to get a better job. And he went to a bank. And so he ends up seeing Julia, and he said, she's like, I just thought that, singing was such a big part to your life. And he was like, well, I need to do some things to better my situation, because he was thinking that's what she wanted. She wanted him to have security and a good job. And she's like, you're above all that material bull. And he's like, no, we live in a material world and I'm a material boy. She's like, no, you're not. She knew who he was. She knew his qualities, and that's what she fell in love with. And then he's like, you're into material crap. And she's like, what do you mean? Well, you're marrying Glenn because he has money. And she was hurt by that, because that's not why she was marrying him. She was marrying him because she, I guess in some ways she thought she loved him, but until she met Robbie, she didn't love him. She loved Robbie. And so you have these examples here from these movies, and it's a clue of what is really true, because in movies like this, they show you what's really important. When they can bring out the good qualities in somebody, rather than the mistaken notion that, your job is more important than love and things like that. So, so I had already touched on it with Sling Blade, that man loses his job. He feels like he has failed his family and is not worth living. And so many men have committed suicide because of that. So man needs to change his identity from what he does to who he is. The good qualities that somebody has. Another good example is the show Home Improvement, where, Tim was meeting up with his old shop teacher, and he went to shake his old instructor's hand, and his shop teacher had a good strong grip that would crush. Well, since he got arthritis, he could no longer shake hands like he used to. And so he invited his shop teacher with his old classmates, and you know, it was up to the shop teacher to make a toolbox. So he had, I think it was like sheet metal that he had to cut, but he couldn't cut it with his arthritis. And so he put it down after feeling aggravated, and Tim went to go cut it. And the shop teacher got angry at him. And it wasn't at him that Tim was angry. He was angry at himself because he felt like he wasn't like he used to be. And so Tim went to speak with Wilson, his neighbor, and he's saying, you know, I made a bad mistake doing what I had done. And then Wilson brought up that, you know, society bases a man's worth by what he does. And Tim's like, you know, disagreeing with it, saying that, you know, I like what I do. I like being Tim the Toolman Taylor. And then Wilson brought up the counter to that. He said, what if you cannot be Tim the Toolman Taylor anymore? And he's like, oh man, I don't know what I would do. I'd lose who I am. And Wilson brought up his good qualities. He said, you're a loving father, you're a great neighbor, you're a good friend. And that resonated with Tim. And even more so when Wilson said, you know, you are also Tim the man. And so Tim went and brought this newly found wisdom to his shop teacher. And it moved his shop teacher to the point to where he believed that himself. And he moved past his issue of worth and saw the good that he actually had. So basically, don't let society feed you the lie that your worth is in what you do. Your worth is in the who you are, the good qualities that were placed in you by God himself. So I'm going to share some scriptures with you to help you to look higher, that you are more than what you think you are. Your identity is not in your job. Your identity is what God has placed in you. So the first scripture I'm going to share with you is in Galatians chapter 3, verse 29. And if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's descendants, heirs according to the promise. And let me pause this. I'm going to find the other ones. And then Ephesians 5, verse 8, for you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light. Then we have 1 John chapter 3, verses 1 to 3. Let me bring that up. And it's a good thing I got two phones to work with, to where I don't have to write it down, because I cannot, you know, sometimes read my writing when I'm writing so fast because I'm taking all the ideas down. All right, so see how great, and this is 1 John 3, verses 1 to 3. See how great a love the Father has given us, that we would be called children of God. And in fact, we are. For this reason, the world does not know us, because it did not know him. Beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not appeared as yet what we will be. We know that when he appears, we will be like him, because we will see him just as he is. And everyone who has this hope sets on him purifies himself, just as he is pure. Then Romans, I don't know if I've already read that one, but it's good to do it again. Romans 8, verse 17. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, heirs also, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with him, so that we may also be glorified with him. And I think that might be all. I don't know if I'd read Galatians 4:7. Okay, Galatians 4:7. Because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, crying out, Abba, Father. Therefore, you are no longer a slave, but a son, and if a son, and an heir through God. So you are no longer a slave in this world. You are a child of God. So anybody who has placed their identity in what they do, that you feel like your worth is in your job, and you have so let that permeate in you that you have, strove to be, a good quote unquote provider, and you feel like your worth is what you're bringing to the table. I want to pray over you and help you to see higher, that you are a child of God if you are a believer. So, dear God, I just pray for my brother and sister too. You know everything that they have been through. You know the hurt. You know what society has placed on their shoulders. Lord, I just ask right now that you would lift off these ungodly, worldly expectations that have been placed on them by society. Lord, lift it off them now where they are, if they're listening to my voice. Lift it off them. And Lord, I ask that you would place upon their shoulders that they are children of God. Lord, I just ask all ungodly expectations and responsibilities that they learn from the world, all the negative words that were spoken over them. Lord, I call them to fall to the ground and break and have no effect on them. I place that they are accepted, they are loved by you, and that their worth is found in you. And they are children of God. And Lord, help them to see the great qualities that you have placed in them. Help them to remember that so that they can counter what this world has said over them. So I just pray over them now. Bless all of them in the name of Jesus. Thank you for taking the time to watch.